I thought I was prepared for anything, a job interview, a fresh start, a chance to finally make something of myself. But when I walked into that high-rise office, I was met with something I hadn't anticipated, an opportunity that would push me far beyond my comfort zone, testing both my ambition and my limits. I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing my blouse for what had to be the 100th time, giving myself the classic pre-interview pep talk. Okay, Emma, it's just another interview, just breathe. This time, nothing can go wrong.
Right.
Because my bank account and those university debt collectors sure weren't going to wait forever. I needed this job badly. Working at a high-profile magazine? That would be my dream break. Besides, my sister already worked here as a receptionist, so at least I'd have her for moral support. Just nail the interview, I told myself, adjusting my collar. Finally, I made it to the building, took a deep breath, and stepped through the doors. The lobby was huge, bustling, and filled with people who all seemed just a little too interested in who I was and why I was there. I approached the front desk and gave the receptionist, a guy who looked barely old enough to vote, my best I belong here smile. I'm here for the interview for the writing position, I said, feeling a tiny pang of anxiety. They hadn't specified the type of articles I'd be writing, but how bad could it be? As I waited, I noticed a few curious glances from other employees milling around. And then, in strode my interviewer, a tall man in his 50s, with a broad smile, who looked like he'd be more comfortable hosting a game show than running an interview. His expression was a mix of jovial curiosity, which immediately put me a bit on edge. "Emma, is it?" he asked, his voice booming. "Well, let's not waste any time." He gestured grandly for me to follow, and I couldn't help but feel like I was walking into the start of a rather unpredictable adventure. As we reached his office, he gestured for me to enter, but before I could sit down, I caught him giving me a quick look from head to toe, as if he were assessing the package before approving it. He nodded with a slight smile, motioning me to take a seat. "Emma, your CV is impressive," he said, flipping through a few pages of my writing samples. "It's clear you've got a knack for words." He set my portfolio down and leaned back, folding his hands with a look of satisfaction. "So, let me tell you a little more about the position," he began, his tone almost conspiratorial. "You'd be writing for our lifestyle section."
I smiled politely, nodding.
I'd done some research on the magazine, but had somehow missed the specifics of the lifestyle section. "Tell me, Emma," he continued, "are you familiar with that section?" I hesitated, my mind racing to recall the details. "I've skimmed a few articles here and there," I replied, hoping that was enough. He grinned, clearly picking up on my hesitation. Well, let me give you the rundown. Our lifestyle section is popular, to say the least. We focus on topics that are, let's call them, spirited, and our readers love it. The section's known for its lascivious and salacious takes on relationships, dating, and, well, sex. He paused, gauging my reaction with a slightly raised eyebrow. Our articles often go viral on Twitter and occasionally even hit the national news. We keep it edgy. I kept my expression neutral, though my mind was already racing. Salacious takes on sex? This was not exactly the kind of journalism I had envisioned. I'd always picture myself writing about politics or important cultural issues, maybe even investigative reporting. But I needed this job.
Badly.
I nodded, summoning my most convincing smile. "I'm very interested in the position," I said, my voice sounding steadier than I felt. The man's face lit up with approval. "Fantastic," he said, clapping his hands together. Then, with a quick glance toward the door, he called out, "Julia, can you bring the toy, please?" Before I could process what he meant, an assistant entered the office, holding a sleek black box with a logo I'd seen before in certain ads. My heart skipped a beat as she placed it on the table, revealing what was unmistakably a high-tech, battery-powered, toy. I blinked, feeling my cheeks flush, unsure if this was some sort of bizarre test. There we go," my interviewer said with an enthusiastic grin. "This here," he gestured at the device, "is what you'll be writing your first article about. It's one of our sponsor's latest releases, and, well, as you might guess, sex sells. Especially during Black Friday season." I swallowed, trying to look unruffled. Of course, I'll do the, appropriate research, I managed, my voice a bit higher than usual. That's the spirit, he said, looking pleased. And remember, our sponsors are counting on us to make this look good. He gave me a cheerful wink, as if reviewing gadgets like this was the most natural thing in the world. I took a deep breath, nodding. Well, I thought to myself, guess this is what they call jumping in with both feet. He leaned back, studying me with an intensity that felt oddly out of place. Writing about sex is still very taboo for women, he said thoughtfully. So I'll need to conduct a further check to see if you're up for the job. His eyes narrowed slightly, testing. Have you ever read any erotic literature? I forced a confident smile, though my mind raced. Oh, yes, of course. Once or twice, I replied, hoping he wouldn't catch the slight waver in my voice. He nodded, satisfied, then gestured toward the product on the table. And have you ever used a device like this before? I felt my cheeks heat up, caught somewhere between embarrassment and surprise. No, I haven't, I stammered, suddenly hyper-aware of how tense I felt. My answer seemed to amuse him. There's always a first time, he said with a small, almost casual smile. The remark caught me off guard, making me sit up straighter, my pulse quickening as I weighed the risks. I had to think of my reputation, my career. Was this really what I wanted to do? He noticed the hesitation, and his expression shifted slightly. Look, writing for lifestyle isn't for everyone, he said, leaning forward, his tone a bit softer. If you want to turn down the job, I'll understand. I actually have another candidate coming in this afternoon. I hesitated, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. With a mix of determination and nerves, I replied, I want the job. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. The interviewer's smile widened, and without missing a beat, he called to his assistant. Perfect, he said, a mischievous glint in his eye. Julia, let's try out the product with her, our new hire. I froze. Did I hear that right? A wave of horror swept through me as I tried to process his words, wondering if this was some kind of terrible joke or an extreme test to see if I could handle the pressure. My mind spun, caught between confusion and a strange sense of alarm, leaving me momentarily speechless. The interviewer noticed my expression and let out a hearty laugh. Oh, Julia, why don't you show her the article we were discussing earlier? He said with an amused look that seemed to say, relax, it's just a joke. Julia nodded, handing me a draft with detailed notes, her professional smile in place, as he shot me an entertained glance. I felt my shoulders relax, the tense moment dissolving into strange relief, though my pulse still raced. Julia showed me a photo on her screen, posing with another toy similar to the one on the table, and with a casual smile, she said, trust me, it's no big deal. You might even enjoy it. I tried to keep my expression steady, but my mind kept circling back to the weight of my debts and how badly I needed this job. After a brief pause, I took a deep breath and asked, could you close the door? I knew it wasn't typical, but the request gave me a small sense of control, however minor. The interviewer chuckled softly. Oh, we don't do that here. Open door policy, he replied, giving me an amiable look. We like to keep everything as transparent as possible. I forced myself to nod, feeling the weight of the situation settle over me. The interviewer's expression shifted, turning more intent as he continued explaining the product, his words measured and confident. I tried to listen, nodding along as he demonstrated with a casual precision that left little to interpretation. Before I knew it, I found myself leaning into his words, caught up in his cadence, almost mesmerized by the whole thing. The tension in the room shifted, and I felt a strange sense of weightlessness, like I was floating through the scene instead of actively experiencing it. Just then, a quick knock at the door pulled me back to reality. My sister's voice filtered into the room, and she stepped in, stopping mid-sentence as her eyes took in the scene before her. Her face went through a range of emotions, from shock to something unreadable, her eyes darting between me and the interviewer, clearly unsure of what to say. The meeting room is ready, she managed, her voice strained as she looked to the interviewer. He gave her a knowing smile, nodding as he turned back to me with that same, unfazed expression. I'll just finish up here, he replied smoothly. With a final glance, he stood up, closing the box on the table and offering me a satisfied nod. "Emma, I think you've got the potential we're looking for," he said, his tone as casual as if we'd been discussing a normal writing assignment. "Welcome aboard." Still caught in a whirlwind of sensations and thoughts, I straightened my clothes and rose to follow him out, my mind racing to catch up with what had just transpired. As I stepped into the hall, I saw my sister waiting, her expression a mix of confusion and concern. I moved quickly toward her, placing a hand on her shoulder and meeting her gaze. "Don't mention this to anyone," I said, keeping my tone light but firm, giving her a small, reassuring smile. She nodded slowly, clearly still processing, and I took a steadying breath, walking out of the building. With each step, memories of the interview replayed in my mind, my emotions a tangled mix of curiosity, uncertainty, and a strange exhilaration. The city lights flickered around me, but my mind was somewhere else entirely, trying to unravel the complex feelings that the day had awakened in me. As I walked out, I knew I was leaving with more than just a job offer. I had a feeling this was only the beginning of a journey I never expected to take.